Thou hast no right but to do thy will. Do that, and no other shall say nay.
Welcome to the Dark Ascent podcast, where we illuminate the path to discovering your true will. This is episode 20, Moving Beyond the Veil. To learn more about our work, please visit darkascent.org. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Hi everyone, I am Melektoth, and I am here with my wife Elinara.
Hello.
And we are here for another episode of the Dark Ascent podcast, where we are talking about what I'm calling moving beyond the veil, and I'll describe what that means in a second. But first, I just want to acknowledge that today is the summer solstice, the longest day of the year, and that's pretty important in Thelema, and also pretty much in any pagan or Wiccan or magical circle that you might be in, so we're pretty excited about that today. We've been feeling this recently because since we've been doing Resh, the sun adorations, we've been getting up earlier and earlier and earlier. So I think Elinara might be slightly excited for us to get up a little bit later.
Yes.
As the year goes on.
Yes. Like 7:30 a.m. as opposed to 5:45 a.m.
You have a little longer to wait for that.
I know.
So,
it's worth it though. It's okay.
Yeah. So now the days will get shorter progressively. Okay, so today we are talking about, as I said, moving beyond the veil. It's a little bit of a misnomer because I realize when I say that it sounds a little bit...
Mysterious?
Yeah, mystical, mysterious, sort of like the other side or like spirits, or I don't know, that's how I interpret it, but that's not what I mean at all.
To me it means death.
Yeah, well, same thing.
Yeah.
Spirits, death, whatever.
But that's a Harry Potter analogy though, beyond the veil.
I don't think that originated there. But...
No, it didn't.
So, what I'm actually talking about is... Well, actually, I'll get into it in a second. What I want to talk about today is seeing truth. What I mean by truth is not religious truth, is not dogmatic truth, is not some kind of doctrinal concept or belief or anything like that. That's not what I mean. What I mean by truth is what is at your core. And this is something I've been thinking about quite a bit from a book I've been reading. I'll suggest the book because it's a really good book. It's actually not from a spiritual perspective at all, which is a little bit strange. It's from a psychological perspective, but it's so similar to the things I already believe that it was really cool to read from this perspective. The book is called The Happiness Trap, and I'll have a link to that in the show notes. But it was all about how we get stuck in our thoughts, we get stuck in our stories, in our beliefs, in our conception of the world, and so we suffer, and we don't move beyond our thoughts into what's really beyond those, into what's really true about life, about ourselves, about the world, and so on. And this is something I've known for a long time. I mean, I've had lots of mystical, non-dual experiences. I've studied Eastern philosophy, and so it's not a new concept per se. And it's something that I've tried to express to clients over the years with various degrees of success, largely not. But I think it's important to point out because, the way that I've been thinking about this, and especially what I gained from reading this book, kind of helped me to put it in a different context or in a different frame than what I have been. So I've always said that you can't try to get things to make you happy. You can't try to manifest, you can't try to do magic, you can't try to whatever in order to make you happy, to try to alleviate suffering. And I've said in the past, I believe on the podcast, if not then elsewhere, that there are really two ways of creating, and one of them is false or not very helpful. The first way that most people do it is they create out of a sense of need or lack. They create because they think they need something, that they lack something, that they're trying to alleviate some sort of suffering in their lives. And they think that by getting this one thing, whether it's money or relationship or a job or a house or whatever it might be, that they will fill some gap or some void that was previously unfulfilled. So that's the first way, and that does not work. And the second way is creating from joy, from happiness, from fullness, from this is something I really enjoy, so I want to do more of this. And that does work extremely well. And you see this all the time because, in law of attraction circles, they'll say that if you need something, you can't have it. You're not going to get it. And the moment you stop needing it, it'll come to you, right? So it's not an unusual concept. I just think it's a concept that people don't really embrace or don't really get all the time. And it's something that can really go out of balance too, because in some methods they can focus too much on giving up the desire and that kind of stuff. And I'm not saying that at all. But if you are trying to get something to alleviate some sort of suffering, it just isn't going to work.
Yeah, it's doing it out of desperation, I would say.
Exactly.
Because that just won't get you anywhere. Or if you do get the goal or the desire, it will be incredibly warped.
Yeah, exactly. So the reason that it doesn't work to create from lack, there are a lot of different reasons, but the first and foremost is that if you are trying to create out of lack, you can only ever get what you're feeling, what you're putting out there, what you're focusing on. And so if you're focusing on something you lack and you're trying to fulfill, then the focus on that thing you lack is only going to get you more of lacking that thing. So, for example, if you are focusing on how little money you have or something like that, then all you can ever get is not enough money, because that's exactly what you're focusing on. But, beyond that, what we do a lot of times is we resist, we fight against what we're feeling. Okay? We think that certain circumstances, certain things in life, certain experiences, certain possessions, certain objects, certain people, certain jobs, whatever, can give us happiness, as though it's something that can be given or granted from the outside. And that's just not true. So, and this is what I mean by going beyond the veil. So, on the surface of things, you have the mind, and the mind is constantly going. You have positive thoughts, you have negative thoughts, and you have all sorts of different sorts of thoughts and feelings that come from the mind, right? And this is going for pretty much anyone all day, every day, whether you're paying attention to it or not, right? Your mind is always thinking about something. There's a good book about this. I don't agree with all of it just because it's a little too passive for me, but The Surrender Experiment. Remember that book?
Yes.
By Michael Singer. And he talks all about how you sort of have this inner narrator of life where you look at something and your mind says, yeah, that's a tree, or yeah, that's a house, or whatever. And it's like, well, why did you need to say that? I know what it is. Why do you have to narrate everything that I experience? And that's what the mind does. And then it adds meaning to that is beautiful or ugly or nice or not nice, or what it should be or what it shouldn't be, or whatever, enough, not enough, good, bad, etc. And so it adds meaning and adds stories, and it just this whole layer of stuff, of thought, of stories gets added onto almost everything that we look at. If you just notice as you're going throughout your day and you're looking at things, you're thinking about things, you're experiencing things, and you just observe what your mind is doing, and it's doing exactly that. It's telling you what you're experiencing, and it's telling you what that means, what that's about, maybe jumping into the future with fears of what might happen because of this thing, or into the past with, what you are regretting from the past or whatnot. You know what I mean? And it's just doing this nonstop. Now, again, some people are more aware of this than others, but I think for pretty much anyone, the mind is just going at this all the time. And that's what I mean by the veil, because this whole layer of thoughts is totally untrue.
Yep.
It's just a manufactured layer of random data that's meaningless. And now here's the thing, is that a lot of people will try to take that and say, okay, well, I have positive thoughts and I have negative thoughts. let me try to get more of the positive thoughts and fewer of the negative thoughts, and then I'll be happy, right? And that's sort of what a lot of law of attraction people try to do. Let me try to think positively, let me try to be happy, and let me try to, feel good and focus on what I want, and so on and so forth. And what most people find is that it just doesn't work, because it's really hard, if not impossible, to control the mind. It's really, really difficult to control your emotions, to control your mind through control methods, through fighting your thoughts, through distracting from your thoughts or feelings like some people do. It's just, it might work temporarily, but it really, really does not work in the long term. But that's what a lot of people do. And that's where it comes in, where people say, well, if I just had this one thing, then I could focus on that and be happy and think positive things and everything will be great. And I just need more money, or I just need a relationship, or I just whatever. You don't know how many clients I've had where they've said, I just need this person to be in a relationship with me and everything will be okay, right? And I'm like, okay, well, can you be happy in the meantime? Because that's not what is true right now. No, I can't do that. Okay, well, you're stuck then, because if you are focused on what you don't have and you're suffering, how do you expect to be able to get to what you want? Okay, and you're creating from a place of lack, you're creating from a place of neediness, which is not true. You don't need those things. Those things are not going to fulfill you, because the basic fact of the matter is, the moment that you get the thing you thought you needed, you'll just need something else.
Yep.
You'll just need something else and something else and something else and something else. So you have these sort of long periods of dissatisfaction and suffering, followed by a brief period, sometimes if we're lucky, of relief because you got the thing. And then almost immediately we want something else. You get the new job, and then you're on a high for a while, and then, well, I want more money, I want to be paid more, or I want more responsibilities, or I want another job, or I want whatever. It's ongoing. It never stops. And that's how it is. So that's the mind, and you can't control it. And we're still in the middle of this Tao Te Ching course, the 81 Days to Effortless Success. And so I've been really thinking a lot about the Tao Te Ching, which I've talked about pretty extensively in the podcast, I think, in the past. And that book says the same thing, where you can't control things. The more you try to control something, the less controllable it is. And the way you control something is through embracing it, is through accepting it, is through just being flexible and not needing it to do anything, right? It's kind of the Wu Wei non-doing sort of path. So we're trying to control our thoughts and feelings, and it doesn't work. And just adding on to these negative thoughts and feelings as a result. And it's just a constant cycle, and it just does not work. So what we'd rather do is move beyond this veil of thinking. So, I've quoted from the Book of the Law before, and I've mentioned in the course especially, but I think I've mentioned in the podcast, it says every man and every woman is a star.
Oh, yeah.
And the basic meaning of that is every person is an independent being with their own orbit, with their own path, their own true will, but also sort of a divine being in their own right, an autonomous divine being with their own will, doing their own thing, and that's their star, their true self. Now, that doesn't account for the ego, which is going off doing what it wants, or the mind that's just thinking all sorts of positive, negative things. That's not the true will. The true will is this thing that arises from that star, or that true self of who you are. So, in fact, the Book of the Law, calls the star that you are, it calls it the Khabs, which means apparently star, I believe, in Egyptian. And the thing that veils the star calls the Ku. So there's a verse, it's verse 8 of chapter 1. It says, the Khabs is in the Ku, not the Ku in the Khabs, which means essentially who you really are is at your core, and what veils that, what covers that over, is this personality or this ego or this mind that has a certain concept of who you are and how things are supposed to go. And that's the coup. All right. So moving through this veil, this coup, these thoughts, you get to the cobs, you get to the star, you get to the truth, the center, the core of who you are, right? And that's, you can only do not by controlling your thoughts, not by resisting your thoughts, not by doing any of that, but by completely, totally accepting, embracing all of your experience, your thoughts, your feelings, the whole 9 yards. Now, that's something, again, I've tried to tell clients in the past. It's sort of hard to convince people that's what they need to do. People are really good at wanting to resist things, but acceptance, in fact, I don't remember what I used to call it, but I used to have something where I talked, radical acceptance. Remember that? Radical acceptance? I used to talk about radical acceptance, where you just completely accept everything that comes up. No matter if it's positive or negative or something you want or something you don't want, you just completely and totally accept it.
And it's hard.
It is hard.
Sometimes it's very painful to do that.
Yeah.
And, talking about accepting, I think sometimes with certain people that teach about the LOA, it's very unhealthy because they tell you not to accept your reality.
Yeah, exactly.
To just feel good and ignore everything else.
Yeah.
Ignore reality. And you can't ignore reality either.
No, you can't. You can't ignore it as in pretend it doesn't exist.
Right.
You can stop resisting it, which sort of feels like ignoring it a little bit, because your mind wants to say, I should be freaking out about this thing. Why aren't I freaking out? Or, trying to convince you to react a certain way. And if you refuse to react that way, then it can sort of feel like ignoring it a little bit, but it's not really. It's really looking beyond what the mind thinks is real into what is actually real.
I feel like that's different, though.
No, it is different. It just feels like that.
I'm thinking about your one client you had that was just going around bouncy and always happy.
Yeah.
You know who I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And how she just completely ignored everything. And her husband thought she was kooky.
Yes.
And that's the kind of thing I mean. But I think what you're talking about is more mature.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, this is what's going on right now, but I choose not to be affected by it because I know they're just stories.
Right.
With that being said, that doesn't mean you don't experience your emotions or feelings.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you have to.
Yeah.
But it's the knowing that beyond it.
Yeah, and you do have to, and that's the difficult thing. So, we're so distracted by this veil, by this surface layer of reality, which is our thoughts, our emotions, our experiences, the things we see, hear, feel, taste, smell, whatever, that it's hard to move beyond that to what's deeper, right? Because the mind really tries to convince us that this stuff is so real.
Yeah.
That there is something to worry about, that there is something that is missing, that there is something that we need to happen. And, it tries to convince us of that. And again, it's just not true. Like, why, let's say someone says they need a partner. Why do you need a partner? That's just a story the mind is telling. No, it's okay to want a partner. That's fine to have that as a goal. But to say, I cannot be happy until I have a partner is to completely feed into the mind and to give into it.
I feel bad for that theoretical partner now.
Yeah, I know. Because then once you actually get them, then you're afraid of losing them because they're your happiness. They're your, anchor basically to happiness and sanity. And if you lose them, and I've had this happen with clients where they come to me because they had the partner and then they lost the partner and now they don't know what to do and they're grieving, which is a normal response, but they won't move past, I need to get this person back.
Oh, I have a relative that's going through this.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I want to say, get over yourself.
Yeah,
but much. I can't because he's a teenager for one thing and he doesn't know any better and it's hard.
I had one client recently who and I saw the pattern carrying out from the start, which was discouraging, but just would not move. Okay, so the first time I talked to her, all she went on about is why she should be able to get this person, why he's actually really interested in her, and just on and 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 on about why she should be able to have him. And like, she would say I texted him and asked him if is there a possibility he might still be interested, and just nuts. And kind of on the verge, I don't want to say stalking, it's a little far, but on the verge of it almost.
I swear she did.
And I just said, okay, well, she would ask me, can I get this person? I would say, I don't know. He has free will. I want to be able to get this person. Well, I told her from the start, he has free will, so you may or may not. What I will tell you is you can have someone. You can move towards, having a partnership with someone, having a relationship with someone. I can't tell you if it's going to be him or not because I can't control him. You can't control him. You can't. The book I just read said it really well. They said you can't control anyone. Even if you hold a gun to their head, they could choose to die rather than obey you,
That's a true point.
You can't control anyone. You can't magic or LOA your way into controlling any person. So, and she would email me and say, well, I read this thing about parallel realities that said there's a reality where he is interested in me, and why can't I just go to that reality? And I said, this is just more control behavior, and I'm not going to feed into that because it's just not healthy. And she wasn't super pleased about that. But I said, you're just still trying to control him. And as long as you're trying to control him to get what you want, it's not going to work. Because the fact of the matter is the happiness doesn't come from these surface level experiences. We can take pleasure from them. We can enjoy them. We can, want to experience more of them perhaps in a nice sort of light way, not needy. But real true happiness doesn't come from these surface level experiences. And by surface level, I mean anything that's transient, anything that's a thought, feeling, experience, sensation, any sensory experience, anything like that. You cannot take happiness because, look, if your happiness is dependent on a thing and that thing goes away, well, now where are you? Now you are enslaved to that thing and getting it back. And that's what happens with these relationships that people want, is they're enslaved to the relationship or to that specific partner because they refuse to be happy unless or until they get that person back, right? And so everything hangs on that one thing. Everything hangs on it. It just doesn't work.
And that is not how I got Melektoth.
Yeah.
I was open, but my parents had just separated. I was scared to death to have a serious relationship. Yeah. And he just decided to fall into my lap.
Yep.
Metaphorically
Not
speaking.
literally. Not literally.
So, yeah, I said metaphorically.
I know, I was joking.
But, we all thought that my youngest sister would get married first.
Yeah.
Nope. I had to be the very first person to get married. My older sister's 10 years older than I am. My younger sister's 5.5 years younger. Okay.
Oddly specific.
Well, I'm just saying. It is.
Yeah.
But the point is, nobody thought I would be the one to get married. Especially because I'm the naive one.
Yeah.
So, if I can do it, anybody can do it.
Yep.
But the trick is to not be attached.
Exactly.
Because I didn't want one. I didn't want to get married. Oh, I didn't know. But apparently I did.
Yeah, so, that's, when you don't need it, that's when it shows up. There's a quote from, I want to say Napoleon Hill, and I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't have the exact quote. But he says something... I know. He says something like, when you stop needing the money and it starts coming, it's going to flood into your life with such veracity, with such speed that you'll wonder where it was all those years. It just starts pouring into your life because you're to the point where you no longer need it. You're no longer attached to it. And it's a hard thing because the mind really lies to us and tells us we do need these things, And so this is the veil. And it really helps if you notice the stories that your mind spins, the meaning that your mind gives to things, and the lies that it tells about things. And again, the solution is not to try to improve the veil. So it's sort of like, and I love this analogy and I give it all the time, and Elinara probably knows what's coming.
Actually, I don't.
Oh, well. You won't be surprised when I give it. The allegory of the cave.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Plato's allegory of the cave, where I'm sure everyone's familiar with it, but you have people in a cave, and unbeknownst to them, they are chained up and forced to face a wall where they see shadows playing upon the wall. And the shadows are all they know. And, one person gets free somehow and goes out into the sunlight and sees what truth really is. And he tries to come back and convince the others, those things you're watching are just shadows. Let me unchain you and you can come out with me and see the real light. And they refuse because they say, no, this is all we know. This is what's true. What are you talking about? That's not true. This is what reality is. And that's so applicable. I mean, and this was written like 2,500 years ago. It's just shocking to me. It's so applicable to everything about life. And this is why I use this allegory all the time, because relying on the veil is like being that person watching the wall, the shadows on the wall, and just wanting prettier shadows. Oh, I want a shadow that looks like that. Oh, that's a nice shadow. Oh, that's a not nice shadow. And how can I get more nicer shadows, and not so many negative shadows, not realizing none of this is true. And if you just get up and go out into the light, then the shadows totally fall away. They don't even matter anymore. They're not even real. And that's what people do, is they mess with shadows. They try to get more positive shadows, fewer negative shadows. So, let me think more positively. Well, those thoughts are just shadows. They're just like images on the veil, so to speak, on the surface of this expanse that's underneath of it all. Okay. And, analogy that's sort of similar, but kind of goes with our veil analogy. If you see a veil or a curtain and there's, nice imagery or scenery on that, and you're focused on that, but behind the veil is the best thing ever that you could ever imagine, but you're so distracted by the image on the veil itself that you won't open it up and go through. That's what people are doing. So, you just want nicer images, nicer shadows, nicer thoughts, nicer experiences, and so on and so forth, when all of that stuff is fleeting, and you're always going to get a mix of positive and negative. Always, 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 always. There's never going to be a time where every single thought coming through your head is a positive thought. No. It's never going to happen. You're never going to have a time where every single feeling that travels through is a positive feeling. We're always feeling joy and happiness and peace and ecstasy and whatnot. That's just never going to happen. You're going to experience anger. You're going to experience sadness. You're going to experience fear, sometimes anxiety, sometimes frustration. That's just the reality of things.
It's just how this life is.
Right. That's just how things are. And so if you insist on, I need more nice shadows and fewer bad shadows, or, not nice shadows, you're just going to suffer, because you're just manipulating the surface, and it might work for a short time, but it won't work forever because it's not true.
And then you might be accused of being manic.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Well, that's what people that are manic do.
Yeah.
They just... happy, like too happy. And you can tell because it's unnatural. And, it's kind of a mental issue, because they're happy at stupid things.
Right. Yeah.
That don't even matter.
Right. So none of that stuff is true. And you can't... I think this is the central flaw to a lot of law of attraction approaches, is that people want to just think positively or feel good or whatever, and they think that's the way that they're going to get their goal, and then they wonder, why aren't I getting it? And it just doesn't work. So moving beyond the veil means moving to that next level, where whatever shadows come, whatever image is on the veil itself doesn't really matter, because you see through it. See, the thing about this veil is that it's so active, so ever-changing, and so distracting, so convincing, that we don't see what's past it. And I've talked about this periodically I had an experience. Well, the most recent major one was 5 years ago. There was another one
6 years ago.
No, 5 years ago. It was 2014.
Oh, you're right. Sorry. I don't know how to count.
There was another one 8 years ago, and they happened periodically prior to that. But those are the two major ones. And so ever since that time, well, I do get distracted for sure. Elinara will attest to that. Okay. It's almost impossible for that to go on indefinitely because, it's a lot easier for me to see through the veil. I'm not bragging or saying that, I'm better or something. It's just I've had those experiences, and so it's a lot easier to see through the veil.
Well, you've been through it a lot.
Yeah, than I think it is for a lot of people. Yeah. So, but, the veil is so distracting, and it's hard. Now, what happens is what's beyond the mind is, of course, that what you really are, right? This book I just read called it the observing self. A lot of non-dual teachings will call it awareness, witness consciousness.
It's all the same.
Yeah, the true self, whatever it is. It's that part of yourself that is totally, utterly unaffected by anything and everything. Now, this is a really big realization if you allow it to be, because it really feels like we're affected by things. So let's say someone criticizes you, for example, and it hurts. You feel anger, you feel hurt, you feel doubt, maybe, insecurity, because what if they're right? And all these different feelings. The thing is, that's just on the surface. That's just on the veil. Beyond that, there is a part of you, or what is really truly you, that simply notices. Yep, there's fear. Yep, there's insecurity. There's doubt. There's anger. But has no judgment about it, is not affected by it in the least, and simply notices what's coming up. And with practice, you can see this part of yourself. So even if you just pause a second and you notice for a moment what you're experiencing right now, you could notice your thoughts, you could notice your breath, you could notice your physical sensations, you could notice, hearing my voice, seeing something that you might be seeing right now, any sensation, any thought, etc. Whatever you're noticing. And you can also notice that you're noticing these things. So it's sort of another layer removed from the experience. I'm noticing that I'm noticing Melektoth's voice.
That always happens to me with audiobooks.
Yeah.
And it always has when I was growing up, but I didn't know what they were called.
Yeah.
Where I was like, wait, who is this listening to the audiobooks?
Yeah.
And it freaked me out until I talked to Melektoth about it. He's like, oh, not many people have those experiences. And I'm like, oh. So maybe I'm further along than I thought I was. Yeah. Because when he first started talking to me about non-duality, I thought he was smoking crack.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, she thought it was a psychological condition or something.
Yes, I did. I thought he was going bonkers. But I respected him enough not to tell him.
Yeah, she's super nice. But
well, no, I knew you weren't crazy.
I know.
Just...
It sounds like it, though.
It does.
But you can notice that part of you that notices. Now, here's the thing. That part of you that notices, that's all it does. It's always noticing. And it's always noticing with openness and with interest and with, you could even say, curiosity. Sort of like a child, almost. That part of you is always noticing whatever comes up, whether it's positive or negative. And that part of you has literally no preference, zero preference for one experience over another. I'm reminded of, there's a verse, I'm sorry, I've been memorizing the Book of the Law, and so I get random verses that pop into my head because, if I'm talking about something. But in verse 22 of chapter 1, it's Nuit's chapter, who's the star goddess. She says, "Let there be no difference made among you between any one thing and any other thing, for thereby there cometh hurt." And that's what this part of you does. It makes no difference between any one thing and any other thing. It doesn't make a distinction between experiences. It's just all data. Okay? You're just noticing everything that comes up. So that part of you is literally unaffected by any experiences. You could have the worst experience in the world. You could go through the worst trauma of your life, and that part of you is unaffected. That doesn't mean you shouldn't have emotions. The emotions will come up, but the emotions are not you. They are not who you are. They are what's on the surface. The grief, the hurt, the disappointment, the insecurity, the sadness, the depression, the fear, the anxiety is not you. They are what you are noticing. If there's something you can look at and say, yep, that's something I'm experiencing, it's not you. You're not the thoughts, you're not the feelings, you're none of that. You are that which is beyond all of it. I used to describe it with the word silence. I used to have a website called Awaken to Silence. And to me, that's like the best description of what's beyond everything, because there's this silence, this space that everything arises within, and that's always present for us if we look at it. So that's you beyond the veil, okay? And if you can see that, then the veil starts to fall away. The veil starts to be not so important because you realize that it's just stuff that you're experiencing, stuff that you are noticing on the surface, but it's not you. So that's beyond the veil, but the way to get there is not by, again, making a difference between one thing and another thing. The way to get there is by accepting, by embracing all experiences.
Even the painful ones.
Even the pain, especially the painful ones.
Yes, and you have to feel those emotions.
Yeah.
It's important.
Yeah.
You can't, I'm not saying like if you're beyond them, you're beyond them, fine. But for example, if you do have a trauma, don't fight it, what you're feeling.
Yeah.
Because it's going to make it worse.
Yeah.
You have to be okay with every single thing you're feeling.
Right.
And thinking. And then, only then can you get out of it.
Right. All emotions are okay.
Yes, and trust me, because I know I have chronic pain, and I used to fight it.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to fight my emotions around it,
mm-hmm.
and it made everything a hell of a lot worse.
Yeah. So when you can stop trying to control what the shadows look like, and you can just accept them all as they are, then you move beyond the shadows and into what's deeper, into the awareness, into the silence, into the cobs, of who you are. And that's the true you. Now, accepting everything, because when we say yes, when we embrace every experience, it doesn't have any power over us. We think that, if I accept this experience, then I'm giving it power, then I'm letting it stay around. No. Anything you push against, you're giving power to.
Yeah.
Anything you resist, anything you try to control, anything you try to get rid of, you're giving power to. And you're letting it get stronger. But if you accept it and embrace it, then it has no power. And it comes and goes as it pleases. A really common metaphor they use in non-duality is, who you are is like the sky, and the thoughts and feelings and everything else are just clouds traveling through the sky. The sky has no preference for a storm cloud, which apparently we have right now because it's raining, downpouring. A storm cloud versus a nice white puffy cloud. It has no preference between a tornado or just a clear sky. It doesn't have any preference. Everything simply moves through unattached, to the sky. The sky doesn't attach itself to anything. It doesn't hold on. It doesn't push against. It's open to everything that comes through. And when you can do that, then you'll have the storm clouds. The sky doesn't have any fewer storm clouds just because it's open. It has an equal amount of them. It doesn't think, I'm open, so I shouldn't have any storm clouds. That's an ulterior motive. But, when you're open, you're going to have negative stuff come up. But it'll just travel through because you're open. And because you're not resisting it. And because you're not pushing it away or pushing against it. It'll just travel through and it's okay. And you just expand yourself to just completely allow those feelings through and those thoughts through. Okay. So acceptance is the way that you get beyond the veil. And, like I said, it's very distracting, the veil, our thoughts, the mind. Throughout the day, it's just, most people just believe all the stories that the mind tells them. And it takes practice to really look at, this is what I'm thinking. These are the stories I'm telling. The book I was reading had a really simple little technique I never really thought of before, but I love it, where when you're having a thought that you don't like, you just tell yourself, I'm having the thought that blank. Whatever it is. I'm having the thought that I'm not good enough, or I'm having the thought that I can't do this, or I'm having the thought, whatever it is. And even another layer of removing yourself from it is, I notice that I'm having the thought that blank, whatever it might be. And just doing that a lot of times is enough to sort of separate you from the distraction of that thought and to kind of move beyond it a little bit into what's beyond the veil. And so when you do that and you keep practicing that, you start to see, okay, these are just thoughts. These aren't reality. These aren't true. They're just thoughts. Okay. And moreover, there's something that's beyond the thoughts that is totally unaffected by whatever thoughts are traveling through. And this is something you have to gain through experience. It's not something I can tell you. Yes, who you are is unaffected by your thoughts. You have to sort of practice that and look for it yourself and experience it firsthand before you're really going to get it. None of this stuff is something you can just believe. Like, yeah, I believe that I'm unaffected by thoughts. Like, well, okay, have you experienced it? Because unless you've experienced it, it's useless. It's worthless, right? But if you have experienced it, then you know. And maybe you just get a glimpse of it. But that's something. What Elinara said, with how she got a glimpse of that when she would listen to audiobooks. And that's a glimpse. You have somewhere to start. And then you can keep doing that. You can keep detaching yourself from your thoughts, from your feelings. You can keep realizing that, no, this is not true. This is not me. It's just a thought that I'm having or a feeling that I'm feeling. And it's just data. And there's that. And then there's the self that experiences that notices, that watches, that witnesses that. And that's who I am. Okay, again, none of this is a belief thing. It's all experiential.
Yeah.
But it's true. I find it fascinating that it's so true that psychology has recognized that it's true. Now, they won't go as far spiritually, obviously. Like, they just talk about the importance of accepting everything. And they do talk about the observing self, that there's a part of you that's beyond the thoughts. But, obviously they won't go into the spiritual, what that actually means, the ramifications of that. But I just find it fascinating that psychology and science has proven that this actually works. Because, belief is one thing, but truth is another. Something that works is completely different than just something you believe in. So I just find it really interesting that psychology has sort of proven that this does actually work. But the more you see beyond the veil, the less the veil will distract you. And that it will distract you, probably for years and years and years and years and years, probably for the rest of your life. But the better you get at seeing through it, the more often you'll see through it, and for longer times. So why does that matter? Because when you can see through it, you don't have to suffer. You don't have to be attached to those negative feelings that may come through from time to time. And you are in a much better place to experience true happiness. So, how does this affect actual, let's say, creation or magic or law of attraction, or whatever you want to call it? We're no longer creating from a place of ego, a place of mind, a place of neediness. We're no longer creating on the surface. We're not trying to create nicer shadows because, oh my gosh, I don't like those scary shadows. Those are bad. We are creating from a place that's far deeper than that. We're creating not because we need something, but because this would be pretty nice to experience. I'm not going to suffer without it. It's just sort of, it'd be cool to have or cool to experience this thing. And so you get to that point where that's where you start to create from more and more and more. And that can only really happen when you can see beyond the veil, because if you're stuck in the stories, it doesn't make sense. There was a forum I used to frequent. There was someone who was talking about how, he's stuck in this really small apartment with his wife and child. I don't remember if they had 1 or 2 children. And they just really need to move out because it's just cramped. They really need a bigger house. And this is really serious. How can they make it happen? And they would not grasp that they don't need it to happen. And as long as they think they need it to happen, it's not going to happen, right? Because they're doing it from lack. And, again, the mind will weave a really nice story about why I deserve this and why this needs to happen and why can't it happen sooner and how can I make it happen and all this sort of stuff. But none of that is true, right? And when you can see beyond that story and not create because I need it, but create because, wouldn't it be nice to have a bigger house? That'd be kind of fun. Like we could have this thing and that thing and that thing. That would be fun and enjoyable and whatnot. There's a sort of playfulness about true creation. There's not a neediness, but there's more of a playfulness about true creation.
It's so hard when you really think you need it.
Yeah.
Like
it is hard.
Someone on the streets, for example, needing to have a home.
Right, yeah, and it's hard.
It's hard when you're in the situation.
It is hard. It's very hard. But it's how it is. And sometimes it can feel like the whole universe is against us and like nothing is ever going to work out. It's not true. I find that even just a little bit of letting go will result in some sort of positive experience, So the more you can let go of the neediness and the more you can kind of embrace the playfulness, that's how it really starts to happen, So, but also, I've talked about the true will, a central part of Thelema is do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, and which we start our podcast with now. And the true will does not arise from the mind. The true will is not a desire that kind of sounds nice. The true will arises from the cobs, the star that you are. It arises from that deepest part of you that is on course. And it arises not from putting in a lot of effort and trying to control things and things like that. It arises, and this is what I realized the most from studying the Tao Te Ching, it arises from letting go and embracing everything and following the path of effortlessness and of non-doing. So, we have this happen all the time. It happened just recently, where there'll be a decision we're thinking about and it'll be something we want, and the more we kind of try to pursue this decision or this thing we want, the more forceful it feels.
Yep.
And at some point, one of us points out, this kind of feels forceful. Either the thing itself isn't supposed to work out, it's not our true will, or the way we're going about it isn't our true will. But one way or another, this does not feel right anymore, right? Life is supposed to be effortless. And I think that's one thing that has been improved with time. If you read a lot of Aleister Crowley's writings, from 100 years ago, 80 to 100 years ago, he focused a lot on controlling the mind, on meditation and, controlling your thoughts and your actions and your speech, all this kind of stuff. It's a very control-oriented thing. And I think today we have more of the understanding that that's just not really that helpful. This sort of brute force approach of I'm going to control my thoughts, doesn't really work all that much. And so, we don't really have a need to quiet the mind by thinking about nothing or single-pointed focus like yoga talks about or Crowley talks about as well. Really, all we need is to accept everything that's here And then we effortlessly glide past the veil and into the awareness and the peace that we are. So, for me at least, and maybe my opinion will change, but I doubt it, I don't see the effectiveness or the point of trying to control the mind to think a certain way, or to only think about what you want to think about, or to hold a certain thought for a certain period of time and whatnot. I just don't see the point of that, because it's a lot more effective, and this is psychologically proven now, to, first of all, you can't control the mind, and secondly, that the best way to have a better experience is to accept everything as it is.
And that's a meditation in itself, isn't it?
It is, absolutely.
To accept.
It absolutely is, yeah, to accept everything.
I'm pretty sure that Hinduism has this meditation that I don't know the name of. I can't remember. But the point is, you sit outside and it's hot and there are all these bugs and you don't react at all.
Really? I never heard of that, but it makes sense.
It was in Eat, Pray, Love, remember?
Oh, maybe.
And they would just sit there, and if they got stung by a bee, or if it was really hot, they just sat in stillness.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't react. They had to go for like an hour without moving.
Wow, that's crazy.
Talk about radical acceptance. I couldn't do it.
Yeah, no kidding. Wow.
Is it called asana? No, is that something?
No, that's physical postures.
Okay, well, you can look it up, because it is a thing, I promise.
I shall. But that sounds interesting, though. But yeah, I mean, there's no need to control your mind. It's just accepting everything that's here. And by accepting, you'll effortlessly move past the stories, past the thoughts. Your mind will sort of effortlessly quiet down. Now, it may not stop altogether. You don't need it to. But it will kind of settle down, and you'll be able to move past it. But your true will arises from that which is beyond the mind. It rises from the star that you are, the cobs. And it can only, in my opinion, again, Crowley had this whole complicated thing about how to discover your true will and all this kind of stuff. And it's supposed to be this really complicated, hard thing to do. I've been testing this a lot over the last few months. And in my opinion, it's not hard at all. I mean, maybe just for me, I don't know. For me, the only thing you need to do to discover your true will is to move beyond the mind, to let go of everything the mind is saying, of what you should be doing, and to allow the effortless calling of your star be heard and be felt. And you'll know, because it'll sort of feel like this thing makes sense. It'll just be this very gentle, quiet thing. This thing makes sense. Or that thing makes sense, or something will happen where it becomes really super obvious. But the more you can let go of what the mind is saying, the more the true will can arise to the surface and show itself to you.
And your values, right?
And your values, yeah. This book talked a lot about values, and I think that goes right along with your true will. Your values are, how do I want to live my life? Well, that's what your true will is. Right. So all of that becomes abundantly clear when you can just move beyond the mind and allow that truest part of yourself to come up to the surface and make itself clear, and it's what's most natural to you. But when I say most natural to you, not from a place of mind, what's most natural to you from a place of mind or ego might be, something that's destructive to you. Mm-hmm. Right? Well, I don't want to do this thing because it's hard or it's scary or whatever. Well, if you go beyond all those feelings, then there's just a deep knowingness. Yeah, this is what's right. And that's in the intro, we've been saying, thou hast no right but to do thy will. And if you can get in touch with that part of yourself regularly, that's exactly what you'll do. You'll do your true will. And by doing that, and that's to me what true creation is, allowing your true desires to come up to the surface. And by true desires, it does not have to be altruistic or, like this really selfless, wonderful thing or something. It could be very simple. Usually is very simple. And it will be fun. It will be enjoyable. Maybe scary, but that's just how it is.
It could be as simple as going to the movies because you want to.
Right. But your true will make itself known to you. And it will be the most effortless, obvious path. Now, when I say effortless, it doesn't mean it won't be scary. It doesn't mean that you might not have some negative feelings about it. It doesn't mean, that there might be some fears or something that might happen. But it'll be the thing that if you don't do it, it just won't feel right. You need to move in this direction. It's a calling. It's a feeling that this is where you need to go. So when you can move beyond the veil of your thoughts, of your experiences, of your feelings, when you can be who you truly are, then your truest nature and your true will rise up to the surface and become very well known. So this was, I know, a bit of a deep one. I don't know what hit and what didn't, but I would encourage you to try it out. And when I say try it out, I just mean try to look beyond the mind. Okay, a really simple technique I used to give my clients, and this was actually repeated in the book, so I was kind of surprised. The Happiness Trap book is what I'm referring to. But the technique I used to give my clients sometimes would be looking at the facts. So we can say, oh, this person doesn't like me, or that thing happened and it shouldn't have happened. And I'll say, okay, what are the facts? Like if you were, let's say, an AI, an artificial intelligence, or if you were some alien from another planet that had no attachment to these circumstances, how would you describe it? If you were an impartial observer.
That's cool.
How would you? You've been there when I've mentioned this technique before.
I don't remember.
Oh, well.
It's ringing a very faint bell.
Okay. Well, it's been a while since I've mentioned it, to be fair.
Yes.
But if you were a totally impartial observer, an alien from another planet or like an AI or something, how would you describe the situation? No emotional terms, nothing like that, just facts. So, an example could be if someone said something that hurt you, for example, then the facts might be so-and-so said these words to you. And those words, those are the facts.
Yeah.
That person's motivations, they did it to hurt me. They did it because they don't like me. They did it because they're out to get me. All that stuff is stories. An impartial observer would not say any of that stuff.
I picture a robot going, they said these words to you.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So another example, if, you have the thought, I can't ever get out of this financial situation. Okay, well, that's a judgment, right? That can be really convincing. It really seems like that might be true. But again, what are the facts? What would an alien see or something? And they might say, you make such and such amount of money per year, and they would just describe your financial situation and what you spend, and they would not describe anything about what you can do or what you can't do or anything like that. They would just describe what's exactly true. This is how much you make, this is how much you spend. That's it, right? There's no judgment there whatsoever. So looking at the facts is a really helpful way to kind of move beyond the stories of the mind. So that's one way. And again, the other way is just whatever's here, just totally embracing it. Just noticing, again, this is the thought, I'm having a thought that whatever, or I'm feeling whatever, and just noticing it and accepting it and being okay with it. So the more you can do these things, the more you will get glimpses of that which is beyond the veil. Okay, so one final little metaphor, if we use the sky again, but we have, imagine a really dense cloud cover that seems really dark. Okay, and you're really hating it, like, oh, I don't want it to storm, I hate this. But let's say you turn that around and you say, oh, you know what, it's okay. It's okay. And maybe it will stay that way for a little while longer. Maybe it'll stay dark for a little bit, but eventually the clouds will move aside and the sun will shine through. And that sun is your star, is the core of who you are. I really had a connection with this. I didn't tell you about this, Elinara, sorry, but the other day, it was when I was reading about the observing self, and then, the reminder for Resh came up, the sun adoration. I don't remember what time of the day it was, but the reminder to do Resh came up, and, I was saying the words or whatever, and meditating on it afterwards. And I was thinking, that sun that we're talking about and focusing on is, it's like, okay, the sun is at the center of the solar system, and my cobs, my stars at the center of my solar system. The truth of who I am, this observing self, this real awareness, this witness consciousness, is at the center of everything. And it can sort of feel like, this is the difference between the old eon and the new eon. Go back to episode 18 for about the eons. But it can sort of feel like the sun is blotted out sometimes when it sets in the evening and so on and so forth. So sometimes it feels like the truth is available to us, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes, who we are is here and who we are is not here. But the reality seems to be this everyday, mundane world. But the new eon is the sun is the center. The truth of who you are, your star, your cobs, your true awareness is always shining, and it may or may not be covered over by the thoughts, by the feelings, by the veil, but that's not affecting the sun at all. The sun shines no matter if it's day or night in, your part of the world. No matter where you are or what the weather is, the sun is shining equally, and it always will, and it always has. Okay? And it's just based on the weather at the time or the time of day or whatnot. And so carrying that to your personal reality, yourself is always shining. Your star is always shining equally brightly, as always, eternally. But from time to time, it will be covered over. Maybe even most of the time it will be covered over. But that's not, it doesn't affect you, the star, who you are. It just affects the mind. So that's the false, that's the illusion. But when you can really see through that, then the sun is eternal. You're always seeing it. You always at least know it's there, even if maybe sometimes you don't see it that clearly. But you always sort of know it's there. Right? Even if it's nighttime here, we always kind of know, the sun is over in China right now, or Australia, or wherever.
I always think that too. It's like always in my head, like,
like even when we do the midnight rush, I can still feel the sun's energy, and it's sort of the same thing. Your awareness is always there, even if it's being covered over by thoughts. So it's an interesting little meditation, but the more you see through the clouds, the more you realize the clouds are just clouds. They're not the end of the world or something. They're not literally blotting out the sun. Then you can know that who you are is always there, and who you are is always unaffected.
It's like living in Alaska, because isn't like half the year
Yeah.
only sun?
Exactly.
And half the year only darkness or something. And that's a really good metaphor, because it's like sometimes you feel like most of your life is dark.
Yeah.
It's just interesting.
And yet the sun is always there. It's always available. It's always there. It's never removing itself from you. I mean, that's who you are, so it is you. But from who you think you are, the mind, it's never removing itself from you. It's always there. It's you that blocks yourself from it. And that's it. So again, I know this was a little deep, but it's so important, and I would really recommend that you try these practices. Try to have this understanding for yourself. Don't just believe me, like, oh yeah, that makes sense. No, just try it, look at it, see what you experience. And with time, I think you will get there and you'll see it. But I would love to hear about your thoughts or questions about this. So to see the show notes or to start a discussion, you can go to darkascent.org/DA020. I'm super excited. This is episode 20.
I know.
And also feel free to subscribe to us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. We're available on several different providers. And also, if you want to go deeper with all of this, we're still doing the Circle of Darkness. I almost forgot to mention it. But if you want to receive a monthly newsletter that goes a lot deeper into these topics, this month's newsletter got sent out a little bit late, but it was literally... I don't know how the editor got it into 20 pages, because it was literally like almost 9,000 words. He said to me he thought it was going to be 24 pages. There was so much in it that I just literally couldn't stop writing. And I wrote and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote. So this month's newsletter was huge. If you sign up, I will send it to you. So if you sign up before the end of the month, I will send you this month's newsletter. So it was a really good one. But go over to darkascent.org/circle for that one. And this month, what was it about? This month was about magic and rituals. Magic versus the law of attraction. That was the topic. So if you're
You'll love it, so read it.
It was really interesting.
Or sign up, I mean.
Yeah. So I thank you for listening. We are here every 2 weeks, every other Friday. So you'll be back in July, it looks like.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's almost the end of June already.
The 29th.
No, it's going to be the 21st when this goes out.
Oh, the 21st. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so 2 weeks will be in July.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So we hope to see you next time for the next episode of the Dark Ascent podcast. Until then, I hope you have a great 2 weeks. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Love is the law. Love under will.